Delta is driving up the corona cases in the UK. It was opened too early and travelers and those with few second vaccinations are a problem. And what does that mean for Germany? In the perception of many, Britain had made it. In the end, with persistently tough measures and a quick vaccination campaign, the country has been able to push back the coronavirus surprisingly well in recent months. After a severe third wave of infections in winter, with many deaths, the corona incidence since April has been well below 30 infections per 100,000 inhabitants. Usually only around 2,000 new infections were reported daily. In addition, the vaccinations were so successful that the British government presented an easing plan with which the country should actually return to almost normal conditions by the end of June. It is questionable whether this will be implemented, because the number of infections is increasing again, sometimes rapidly. And what is just about to happen in Great Britain worries German epidemiologists as well. Since the beginning of June, the number of daily new infections in the British countryside has suddenly been back to mostly over 5,000 new infections. As many as 7,540 new infections were reported this Wednesday. The 7-day incidence is again around 50 new infections per 100,000 people. This is still a low level for Great Britain compared to winter, where at least 20,000 cases were often added each day, and the 7-day incidence was quite over 600. However, the number of new infections doubled within a very short time and seemed to herald a new wave of infections. But what's behind this climb? Political decisions play an important role, but there's another unique feature of this outbreak. The coronavirus mutation Delta, also known as B.1.617.2, which was first discovered in India. It spreads faster than Alpha, also called B.1.1.7, the variant that has dominated the infection process in the United Kingdom, Germany and many other countries since winter. Since April, the Delta has been spreading from cities in northern England such as Blackburn, Bolton, Manchester, Leicester, but also from urban areas near Heathrow, Gatwick and Luton airports. In the week leading up to June 2nd, researchers discovered 5,500 new Delta cases, but only 3,700 new Alpha cases as part of routine variant monitoring. According to the British Minister of Health, Matt Hancock, who relies on even more recent data, Delta now accounts for 91% of all new cases in England. Delta was increasingly introduced into Great Britain, especially in April. After COVID-19 cases in Asia rose rapidly, the British government put the risk countries Pakistan and Bangladesh on the so-called red list with effect from April 9th. Entrants had to spend 10 days in quarantine in a hotel at their own expense immediately after arriving in Great Britain. India, however, was spared the classification for political reasons, although the official incidence there at the same time was far higher than in Pakistan or Bangladesh, even if there is less testing there. It was not until April 23rd that India was added to the red list. This allowed thousands to travel further from India to the UK, where many people have friends and family, for example. Anyone who arrived in Great Britain could spend the quarantine period at home and thus often with a family. So good conditions for a more contagious corona mutation. And Delta spread quickly. On May 7th, Public Health England classified them as VOC, which is of concern. Just a week later, the First Minister for Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, had to announce that the easing in Glasgow and Moray would not proceed as planned. And this week, the UK government's scientific advisory bodies, SAGE and NervTech, will discuss the current impact of Delta. The next decisions of Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who will announce on June 14th whether the planned end of the lockdown for England will come or not, will depend on their deliberations. In Great Britain, there has already been extensive relaxation. Shops and schools are currently open again. However, work is still largely done in the Home Office, and only 6 people from 2 different households are officially allowed to meet at home. According to current data, Delta is once again moving faster in the population than the more contagious corona variant Alpha. As a reminder, Alpha is estimated to spread to 40 to 90% faster than previously dominant virus variants. It is now assumed that Delta could have increased its speed by half again. This is evident from data collected by Public Health England between March 29th and May 11th, for example. It investigated how often infected people with different variants infect their fellow human beings. Researchers call this the secondary attack rate. While people infected with the Alpha variant infected their contacts in 8.2% of the cases, the proportion of those infected with Delta was 12.4%. From this and from further investigations, the assumed transfer advantage of Delta results is there. A realistic assessment of what is happening is difficult, said virologist Christian Drosten in an NDR podcast and in coronavirus update. In view of the low number of infections in the United Kingdom, it is currently a relatively influenced, artificially slowed down situation. That makes meaningful studies more difficult, unlike around Christmas, when Alpha was able to spread much more widely among the population. However, these are details. Hardly any researcher still doubts the fitness advantage of Delta when it comes to infections. And not only that, in addition to the higher infectivity, Delta probably also has what researchers call an immune escape. Vaccines could therefore protect less against the variant. There are now several studies that have checked this for various vaccines. An interim analysis compared, for example, how antibodies formed by a BioNTech Weser vaccination affect and how they affect Delta and Beta. Beta now means variant B1351, which was first discovered in South Africa and is known for being able to escape antibodies that have already formed better than other variants. And the current result is Delta and Beta could be equally effective in evading the immune response. This is the first study that shows that the Delta mutation could just as easily escape the immune system as the Beta variant, says the immunologist Carsten Watzel from the Technical University Dortmund. In previous publications, the Beta mutation was still the strongest. Both Politik and the Delta variant themselves have their share in this, which is why significantly more people are infected again in Great Britain. The combination of being more contagious and being more adept at avoiding vaccines a bit is what makes Delta so dangerous. More than 40 million British men and women have now received at least their first vaccination. That means 75% of the population are vaccinated once. With 28 million people, more than 50% of adults are fully vaccinated. At least these 28 million should be effectively protected from Delta. This is suggested by another study by researchers from Public Health England. Fortunately, 2 weeks after the second vaccination with the vaccines from BioNTech, Pfizer and AstraZeneca, the immune protection against symptomatic infection was reduced by only a few percent. In both cases, however, the effectiveness after the first vaccination was significantly worse. Both vaccines only protect a little more than 30% against the Delta variant 3 weeks after the first vaccination. They had protected 50% against Alpha, whereby in both cases the protection against the severe cause of the disease is likely to be higher. For the immunologist Watzel, this underlines the value of the second vaccination. This not only ensures that more immune protection is generated through more antibodies, the protection is also better against new variants, says Watzel. The vaccine from Johnson & Johnson could be a special case, says Watson, even if no data are yet available. One of the strengths of this vector vaccine, which only requires a single dose, is to improve the immune protection a few weeks after vaccination. Studies from South Africa have shown that the vaccine creates only slightly reduced protection against the Beta variant, and it is plausible, says Watzel, that this is also the case with Delta. In fact, the majority of people in Great Britain are currently infected who have not been vaccinated or have only been vaccinated once. Young people and school children are particularly affected at the moment. In numerous secondary schools, the pupils have to wear masks again. In addition, the government has opened spontaneous test centers in risk areas. You should not actually travel to several city districts and regions, but this was never properly communicated. Many urban areas in the north of England are affected. In some of these areas, the Delta variant made up to 90% of all new cases at the beginning of June. In the intensive care units too, there are currently predominantly people with only one vaccine dose or unvaccinated people, including many who had already received the request to be vaccinated. Just over 100 people are currently hospitalized across the UK every day, where just over 1,000 people are currently being treated with COVID-19. There is a possibility that the situation in British hospitals will become more tense again. It's a possibility. According to Public Health England, there is some very preliminary evidence that Delta has an impact on disease severity as well. In other words, those who are infected with Delta could end up in the clinic more likely than those infected with the Alpha variant. The possibly new wave will develop with the vaccination campaign and not in spite of the vaccinations. However, these falter in some places. Especially in parts of some ethnic minorities, the resistance to vaccinations is greater than in the rest of the population. A study by the British Statistical Office in February showed that there are sometimes greater reservations among people with a Pakistani or Bangladeshi migration history, but also among black people. The British government is therefore seeking contact with representatives of local mosques and parishes, just for example, in order to clarify the situation. In the residential areas affected by the Delta variant, there have already been additional vaccination campaigns that have achieved good results. In order to promote vaccinations, the London Sports Stadium in Twickenham was converted into a gigantic vaccination centre at the end of May, in which 11,000 people, including many young people, were spontaneously vaccinated. If the number of cases actually rises to a fourth wave, the comparatively high vaccination rate among those vaccinated for the first time should not prevent a variant like Delta from spreading further in particularly vulnerable parts of the population. The most important conclusion that we should draw from this for Germany is that we have to continue working on our vaccination campaign, says immunologist Watzel. It shouldn't happen to us that a certain amount of vaccination fatigue occurs over the summer, or that people let their second vaccination date pass, but that we protect as many people as possible with second vaccinations. For the immunologist, it's clear the fourth wave will come, and probably also with the Delta variant. How strong it becomes can still be influenced. According to the Robert Koch Institute, the variant currently still accounts for very small proportions of infections in Germany. But if there were still many people in the future who have inadequate or no immune protection, then it will affect them preferentially. We should prevent that by fully vaccinating as many people as possible. And I absolutely agree. I will have my second vaccination in about 2 weeks, and then I have to wait another 2 weeks. Until then, I still avoid a lot of meetings I usually would have had, but I want to be reasonable and I want to protect myself. I had a lot of fun from my first infection last year, and I don't want to have that again. I have long-term fun with it already, and it's more, well, I'm not trying to take that too serious, but you have to deal with that. I'll see you in my next video. Auf Wiedersehen.